John, thanks for agreeing to talk to me today about the issues you're going to talk about at our national conference in November in Sydney. ASIC's been focusing a lot on corporate culture this year, and in particular focusing on conduct as a driver of a sound corporate culture. And in a lot of speeches, ASIC's been talking about behaviour as a driver of conduct, good or bad. Can you talk to me about what ASIC sees as the key indicators of good and bad behaviour?
Look, I think there are three key drivers of conduct, behaviour, culture that we see in the financial services sector. So the first one is really the culture of an organisation, so the way things are done around here. The second one is incentives, so how are people paid, what's important to them in terms of their remuneration. And the third key thing I think is around deterrence. So whether you're talking about the law or company values or policies, what's the likelihood of being caught doing the wrong thing, and what are the consequences of being caught if you do the wrong thing?
So do you see that organisations should have a consequence management plan in place as part of an overarching means of managing culture?
So I think it's very important that if companies feel that certain conduct or certain behaviour is unacceptable, that there are consequences that flow if people do the wrong thing. I think it's very unfortunate where companies or firms say something is good or something is bad, but that then doesn't translate into actual practice on the ground. And a consequence management plan might be one means of doing that, but we don't want to micromanage these sorts of issues.
Well, that sort of leads me into another question. What measures do you think that a board can take to gain a level of confidence around those things?
Look, we don't want to micromanage boards or how they look at culture or monitor culture, but it seems to me that there are a few questions that boards might ask themselves when they're thinking about these issues. Questions such as, are issues around culture and conduct regularly on the board agenda or on the audit committee agenda? Things such as, do members of the board have interactions with key people in the company beyond senior management? Do members of the board have interactions with other key stakeholders for the company, such as customers, suppliers, dare I say it, even regulators? I think then there are also a range of measures that boards can look that might be a useful proxy for how the culture of an organisation is going. Things like what types of complaints are coming in about the company. Things like what are employee engagement scores like, what are pulse employee surveys like, and various other sort of HR metrics that might give you a good indication of what the culture of a particular organisation might be like. So I think there are a range of measures that boards can look at to try and get a sense of what the culture of an organisation might be. But I do suspect they'll need to be tailored for the particular business that the company is running.
So that really is the key message that ASIC's been putting out about the board's responsibility in relation to culture, that setting the tone but also walking the talk and living the values themselves, but then also making sure that those values get lived all the way down through the organisation.
Absolutely. Look, as I said, I think boards do play a very important role, from the appointment of the CEO right through to monitoring the strategy, guiding senior management in some of the key initiatives. And as I said, what areas the board are quite interested to focus on really does send quite an important message throughout a whole organisation, I think.
What is ASIC looking for when you're talking about early warning signs in relation to culture?
Look, I think, again, there are a variety of things, but to give you a couple of examples, I think where investors or consumers are being treated unfairly, to us, that's an early warning sign that conduct within the firm may not be up to scratch. I think where companies say one thing but do another thing is another early warning sign, perhaps that culture hasn't filtered through the organisation as it otherwise might have. I think where there are problems, how a firm responds sends a very important message about its culture as well. For large firms, there seems to me there will always be problems that need to be dealt with. What's very important is how you respond to those issues.
Well, it's like conflicts of interest. They always exist, but it's how you manage them that's important.
I absolutely agree.
And I guess from a regulator's perspective, some other mechanisms for your early warning signs could be breaches that come to your attention.
Look, if you move beyond the qualitative interactions with a firm and how they're seen to be acting, then yes, there are a range of data points that we can look at. We can look at things like the number of complaints that we receive about a particular firm. We can get information from external dispute resolution schemes, if they're a member of such a scheme, about complaints that they've received. Self-reported breaches can be quite important. But as I say, as well as that hard data, there's also an important qualitative aspect in making an assessment about culture as well, I think.
One of the things I want to ask you about is, with all of the discussion around risk management, there's been a big discussion about risk being everyone's responsibility. You know, you must never think it belongs just to the Chief Risk Officer. You must never think it belongs just to the Risk Committee. You must never think it just belongs to a key set of personnel. It actually is everyone's business throughout the organisation. Do you think the culture is everyone's responsibility?
Absolutely. You know, when you think about the classic textbook definition of culture, the way we do things around here, it is the responsibility of everyone within a firm. But as I say, you know, I do think that boards and the CEO and senior management do have a very special role to play in developing and maintaining the culture in any organisation.
Well, they're the leaders of the organisation, and then they will literally set the tone for others to follow.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, at a very basic example, the recent quote, "What you walk past is what you accept." I think there's an enormous power and truth in that particular. Yes, Greg Medcraft quoted David Morrison at the launch of our Ethics Index, talking about ethics and talking about culture. And you're right, it's a very powerful statement, because silence is actually as damaging as egregious behaviour, because you're accepting something that's not acceptable. Yeah, and I think for consumers and for employees alike, you know, there's nothing more corrosive, in my view, to trust and morale than a sense of hypocrisy. So it's something to be really aware of, I think.
Which leads me to a final question. I mean, ASIC has a very strong role in promoting investor and consumer confidence, and so ASIC's interest in culture clearly goes to those issues of promoting investor and consumer confidence. What's that sort of long link? It's not just about the immediate customer, it's not just about the immediate employee, that bigger link to the entire market and the integrity of the market. How does ASIC see that?
Yeah, look, I think in the recent financial system inquiry, there was a quote or a sentence in there that went something like, to promote trust and confidence in our economy, we think that financial services firms need to have consumer interests at heart. And really that's what we're on about when we talk about culture. And it's very logical if you think about it. I mean, if I as a consumer feel like my interests aren't really relevant to a particular firm, why should I trust them? That's why we've got such a strong interest in this area, because in the end, culture really does matter. It does help drive behaviour and conduct, and we're the people that regulate that behaviour and conduct. For us, this is a great way for us to be proactive on these issues.
Well, thanks, John, again, for agreeing to speak to us today, and looking forward to hearing you at the conference in November.
I'm very much looking forward to it. Thank you, Judith.